Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures Podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks, and today we've got a special treat for you. Similar to the Banff episode in Canada where we used just a base area to explore and have adventures, today we're heading to Flagstaff, Arizona, which is surprisingly completely different than most people's image of Arizona. Yet, it's also great not just as a base to get to the Grand Canyon, its neighbor. Flagstaff has got tons of adventure activities and other cool things about it that make it a destination in and of itself. The cute downtown has got a great culture scene, a big foodie scene, an art scene, and tons of urban trails. So while there's plenty to see and do just in the downtown Flagstaff area, the surrounding mountains is also a huge attraction for this region. And this makes it a paradise for adventure lovers like you and me. Our guest, Jenny, lives and plays in Flagstaff, so we get the local perspective and also learn some of the secret places that you might not pick up in a tourist guide. After the interview, Jenny joked that maybe we shouldn't let people in on the secret of Flagstaff. So let's find out why, and let's get started. I first met Jenny when she sent me a lovely email, and I asked if I could get on the phone with her, and she kindly consented, and we were chatting on, and then I found out that she lived in this amazing place that reminded me of an episode that we did in Banff where we concentrated on one area that you could use as a base camp to go out and explore the area. So welcome to the show, Jenny. Could you please introduce yourself and perhaps tell us your age?
Hi, I'm Jenny. I'm 59 years old.
Same as me. Great. Looking at the photos of things that you've done and the things that we talked about on the phone, how did you first get into all this adventure type of activity? I mean, you've done some incredible adventures.
I guess I'd say I grew up with it, growing up in the state of Oregon, and my parents were pretty active. And over the years, my travels with my husband mostly and my kids have been very active, planned trips around either hikes or mountain bike rides or something where we stay active because we realize that just makes the trip more fun for all of us, and then we feel better about ourselves too.
Well, that's great. Now, you happen to live in adventurer's paradise. So where are we going to today?
I live in Flagstaff, Arizona. It's in northern Arizona. Most people think of Arizona as a state full of cactus and sagebrush and stuff, but I live up in the mountains in the pine trees, so it's a good escape if you are in the desert. And we've been here over 30 years. That's
great. And once I did some research for the show, you really do live in an incredible area. You're not too far from the Grand Canyon. You're not far from Sedona. You're not far from Phoenix. You're not far from Vegas. So it's also inexpensive to fly in that area. So what is it about Flagstaff that appeals to you the most?
I love the mountains and the open space. There's a lot of national forest around here, as well as all the national parks and monuments. So there's a lot of room for what I consider my playing. I do go to the gym, but I go to the gym with the idea that it'll just get me out further into the wilds and be able to do my activities out there better. So I just love the wild and open spaces here, which you don't find so much on the East Coast.
And it looked to me from the photos that even though you're at a high elevation, you're close to around 7,000 feet in Flagstaff, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, that's correct.
But it's still fairly flat. And then you had the panoramic view of the mountains in the distance. Am I getting that right from the photos?
Yeah, we have the San Francisco peaks, which are a set of like 5 or 6 big mountains, and they're quite dramatic. They rise to the north of downtown Flagstaff, and that's where a lot of my recreation is, between mountain bike riding, downhill skiing, cross-country skiing, and hiking. We are basically on a big, high elevation plateau with the big mountains sticking up out of it. An hour and a half away, we have the big Grand Canyon sticking downward. So it's a little contrast there.
Very cool. That's really close. So the Grand Canyon is really close to you.
About an hour and a half drive.
Wow. And then also, it sounds like the town itself is quite cute. It's gone through a bunch of redevelopment over, I don't know how many the last decades, but tell us a little bit about your whole downtown scene. What's going on there?
Yeah, well, if you're just driving through Flagstaff, you might think it's a pretty ordinary, not too cute of a town. But if you go down to the downtown area, which has had a lot of renovations and a lot of old-time Western stores, you have a lot of great restaurants, sports stores, other little stores. And then we have a nice little downtown square. We call it Heritage Square. And in the summer, they have movies and music, artwork, and all kinds of stuff. There's a lot going on. And the downtown area, I think, is especially cute for visitors to come to.
And it looked nice, too. I'll put a link to a YouTube video that your downtown organization put together to give people a feel for the downtown. It was quite inspiring. It really made me want to go.
Thank you.
And you also have something called FUTS, if I'm saying that right. FUTS. Can you tell us what that is?
Flagstaff Urban Trail System. Yeah. It's a pretty good sized trail system. It is urban trails. Most, I would say, are gravel and some are paved. But if you don't want to do the big, huge, wild adventures, but you want to go for a little bike ride or a run or walk in and around town, urban trail system is pretty huge. And it's real nice. It's right behind my house, so that's kind of fun.
Oh, that's really nice. So it sounds like the whole town. Have you ever been to Moab?
Yes.
So is it kind of like that vibe where everybody's outdoorsy there, or what's the scene there like? What are the people like? Who's attracted to go to Flagstaff?
It is a lot like Moab in that sense. I think the Moab crowd is maybe a smidge younger because we have all ages and generations here, although we do have a big university population. So we have a lot of young people here. Anybody who can't tolerate the higher altitude, they tend to not stick around. Yeah, real vibrant, moving community. Lots going on for the size of town it is, because we're kind of the hub of northern Arizona, not only for activities, but healthcare and shopping and all kinds of stuff like that.
That's good. And I think the population was somewhere around 75,000. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, that's about right. There's some outlying areas that aren't incorporated in the city, so I would say more like 100,000 might be a little more accurate as far as the feel goes.
That's nice because it's small enough that it's a small town, but it's large enough that you can have enough population to support the cultures and the restaurants and all that, which is nice.
Exactly.
So let's drill down a little bit deeper into some of the activities. Let's start with my favorite, hiking. Tell us about the hiking in the area.
Well, the mountains that you might see on the pictures you're posting, the San Francisco peaks, there's lots and lots of trails around and over and through there. So you've got a lot of hikes there. Most I would consider day hikes. The unfortunate thing about the Flagstaff area is that we don't have a lot of natural running water source. So it's sometimes hard to find the natural springs or water sources you need, especially in the midsummer. But that's a big hiking area. Of course, the Grand Canyon is not far away, and lots of good day hikes and overnight hikes there if you plan in advance. And then down in the Sedona area, there's a lot of day hikes, and there's also overnight hiking possibilities too.
And how far is Sedona from you?
Sedona is probably about 45 minutes south of Flagstaff, depending on which part of Sedona you want to go to. The part that we like the best is more on the west side of Sedona. And from where we live, we take about an hour and 15 minutes to get to the trailhead.
Nice, nice. Now, in my research, I put together a list of 20 popular trails in the Flagstaff area. I'd like to go over a couple of them with you, if you can just tell us a little bit about them. The first one I'd like to talk about is one called the Kendrick Peak Trail.
Sure. That's one that takes you up to Kendrick Peak and gets to the real height of the mountain. I think it goes up to 12,000 feet or beyond. So yeah, that's a very popular trail in the late spring and early summer, depending on the snowpack. And later in the summer, it can also be popular. You have to just watch out for lightning because we get some afternoon rain showers and lightning here.
Yeah, that was on my list to ask about because when you were in your, called it your monsoon, but I guess you get a daily thunderstorm. For those of us that don't have that as part of our normal risk factors that we need to be aware of, tell us about lightning safety or what do the locals do or how do you plan your days knowing that you're in your thunderstorm season?
Right. So the monsoon season, you're correct. We call that. It usually starts in early to mid-July, and it's typically the morning is clear and then it clouds up in the afternoon, and then we might get a thunder shower and rainstorm, and then it tends to clear up again in the late afternoon and evening. Of course, lately it hasn't been quite as predictable as that. I think there's some global climate change stuff happening, but you have to work around the lightning and you want to be safe. There are lightning strikes every year here, and I just prefer to go out super early and be back early so I'm not up there when the clouds start rolling in if you're going to be up in the mountains.
And so what time would you recommend people turn back to start heading back down the mountain?
Oh, anytime you start seeing clouds coming in, because a huge amount of clouds can be just around the corner, like around the other side of that mountain, and then they will come in really fast and you'd be prone for a lightning strike. But I'd want to be off the mountain if there's any clouds coming in.
Okay. So it's normally cloudless where you are? Like I always, just about always have clouds in my sky.
Right. And there's a difference between the clouds that produce the thunder and lightning storms, the big cumulus clouds versus just a little cloud cover. But yeah, it's typically very blue sky here. We get a lot of sunshine days here.
And then also I want to backtrack too. You talk about not a lot of water. Since there's not a lot of water and now you're at altitude, can you talk a little bit about how much water you need to be packing with you when you do hike?
Yeah, we're at high altitude desert. So if you were at a low altitude desert with a lot of heat, you would want to carry like a gallon a day or something and plan something like that. Up here, it's a little less because it's cooler temperatures. So if I go out for, say, a 2-hour hike, I usually take at least a quart with me, sometimes a quart and a half. It can be a lot of water. It just depends on you and what time of day you start. When I hike, I actually like to start fairly cold, so I'm a little chilled, and then you warm up, and then as you warm up and start sweating, I start taking off layers. So then I feel like I sweat just a little less and may need a little less water. But be very careful with the water here and how much you drink. You should drink quite a bit, especially the altitude and the climate.
Right. And it being so dry, too, you don't even realize you're sweating sometimes because it evaporates.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I know, too, from things I've studied about dealing with altitude, which I have some issues with, is that if you keep yourself well hydrated, you'll have less symptoms as well.
That's true. Yeah, I find that I do drink a lot of water or tea or whatever. And then when I visit family out in your area, I keep drinking the water and then I keep going to the bathroom and everybody thinks I might be diabetic, but I'm like, I'm just used to so much drinking the water. Yeah, it's a good habit to get into.
So, and there's one more thing I saw on the Kendricks Peak Trail, that when the view's nice and clear, you can actually see the Grand Canyon from the peak.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And so that was one of the more strenuous hikes on my list. An easier one was called the West Fork Trail.
Oh, down in Sedona area, that's a hike where you're in water quite a bit. So it'd be pretty cold this time of year, but you're in water and narrow canyons of Oak Creek in Sedona. And I actually haven't done very much of that. I've just done a little bit. And then we hit cold water and I didn't want to do any more. But very popular hike.
And then another difficult one is called the Bearjaw Avenue or Avenue. How do you pronounce that?
Avenue. Yeah, Avenue. That's a nice, really nice loop hike. I think it's around 9 miles and, correct me if I'm wrong, 1,500 to 2,000 feet elevation change.
Yeah, it's considered the hardest on my list of 20.
It's definitely a nice day hike. It takes you from the forested floor and then you get up close to the edge of tree line or maybe slightly above tree line. And often even in the middle of the summer, you'll hit a snow patch because that's on the north side of the mountains, the San Francisco peaks.
Now let's talk a little bit. You mentioned the pines. You have a very special kind of pine tree there and one of the largest tracts of the continuous forest of that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We do. We have a huge tract of ponderosa pine trees up here. They are huge, beautiful trees. We're surrounded by them. They do forest and log them, but yeah, they're a wonderful tree, but they are prone to burning. So fire danger in the summer is something we all need to be careful of. So we don't light fires in the forest.
Did I read that the Forestry Service is now starting to do controlled burns again? We do those here.
Yes, they have. And they've done them for quite some time. And I think there's actually some going on today. They try to time it with the weather and the wind. So we do get them, and that's good. And they are starting to do more with thinning and culling out the forest, which makes for a lot of times prettier bike rides and prettier rides because you get a little more depth when you look through the forest. You can see the animals better, the deer and elk, whatever you're looking at.
The ponderosa pine is known for being a really tall tree with a super straight trunk. In fact, it was often used as ship's masts back in the day.
Yes.
And it's also how the town of Flagstaff got its name. It's a fun story. The city got its name after the ponderosa pine flagpole that was made by a scouting party from Boston that was celebrating the United States centennial on July 4th, 1876. They also refer to this as the Second Boston Party. So that's a pretty cool story. Any other your favorite trails that we should be covering as well?
Oh, yeah. The Kachina Trail, and it's also up in the Kendrick area. That's a really beautiful trail. I think I sent you a link. There's a lot of fern on the trail with certain seasons. Oh, and the Schultz Pass trail system is really fun. That's quite close to my house. That's kind of my go-to for mountain bike riding here.
Which is a good segue into mountain biking. Tell us about the mountain biking scene out there.
It's a big scene. There's a lot of mountain bike riders out here. In fact, I would say the Schultz Pass Trail, there are walkers on it, but you don't want to be out there on a weekend or when there's a mountain bike race. That would be pretty uncomfortable. But during the weekdays, and especially this time of year, it's great. But yeah, there's a lot of mountain bike riding people here. Just quite a mecca for that. Not maybe quite as big as Moab, but we've got the higher hills and we've got a lot of climbs. We've got downhill riding and some really nice traverses just to see the country.
In the research that I did, it looked like most of the trails were intermediate to expert. Do they have something for beginners like me?
Yeah, I would say so, but they wouldn't be called trails. They would be called Forest Service roads. So that's what I would take a true beginner on. Although there are some easier trails. And then there's always the urban trail system that's really fun and can get you into a lot of different beautiful scenery areas too. There definitely are some beginner trails, so don't worry.
Okay, yeah, because I was like, I read there's like 35 or 36 trails, most of which are intermediate, and like 6 to 8 of them were expert. I was like, well, that's beyond my scope, but it looks like a beautiful area to ride.
Yes, it is. We also like going down into the Sedona area, the hour drive away, and bike riding down there in the winter or when the weather's not so good here. It'll usually be pretty nice down there.
Is that because it's lower elevation, or that's not that far away for it to have such a different climate?
Yeah, you're definitely dropping down about 2,000 feet, 2,000 or 3,000 feet, depending on where you go. And you get into the red rocks and you're definitely into the sagebrush and more the cactusy type country for the most part. So yeah, you drop down in elevation and then it's just like a totally different climate.
So your regular landscape, then what do you see like when you're just riding around immediate countryside outside of the main development? Like what does the landscape look like?
Kind of rolling to flat areas and then dropping down into some canyons and arroyos and lots of pine trees. But then there's some big meadow areas too.
Is it mostly covered in landscape or is it like sporadic, like the cacti are further south where you just see occasional things, or is it forest and then meadow? Or I'm trying to get a picture of what it might look like.
The forests tend to be pretty open, so you can see a long ways through the forest, and the trees are pretty widespread apart, especially if it's been thinned. But a lot of times when you hit an area where you have no trees around you, you get these incredible views, like you can see the mountain or you can see other structures or other hills in the distance. Just depends on where you're riding. But a lot of times our rides kind of end in a viewpoint, so you can get some really nice distant kind of viewpoints here.
And a lot of the trails on my list too also spoke about the wildflowers. When's the best time to come see the wildflowers?
Midsummer, actually, mid to late summer sometimes. A lot of times our springs are fairly dry, and so the flowers wait until that what we call the monsoon seasons start in July, and then maybe a week or so into that, we really get some beautiful blooms.
Nice. And then some are known for their birding. What would we expect in some of the birding trails?
There's a wonderful lake south of town called Mormon Lake, and there's a lot of birds out there. Apparently, they have an Asian crane out there. My husband and I tried to see it. It apparently got stuck there recently. I would go to the water sources for the birds mostly, and that would be a couple of the natural and man-made lakes in the area.
One thing that you are really known for too, and in fact, it's an important part in the U.S. countryside for, is your night sky. Tell us about that.
Oh, yes. Flagstaff is one of the first dark sky cities in the country, if not the first. We have an observatory here, so they've done a lot of research into space and the atmosphere. In fact, they discovered Pluto in Flagstaff. So there are city ordinances that make us keep our lights lower or dimmer, or, certain kind of lights aren't allowed, and like street lights we have them, but they're maybe dimmer than you might be used to in other places, so that observatory can still see the stars and the nighttime views.
I have a beautiful picture that I'm going to post on the website of the Milky Way taken in the Flagstaff area that's just stunning. It's one of the most beautiful night sky photos I've ever seen. So do you just take it for granted, or is it something we go out there like, oh my God, or is it something you just, the night sky again?
Oh, no, we don't take it for granted. We realize what of a beautiful place we live in. A lot of times at sunset, we'll be outside and we watch the stars come out and the moon come up, and we know it's a beautiful moment. Some of the best scenes of the dark sky, though, are when you're like down in the Grand Canyon and all the side light is filtered out. That's really amazing.
Now, I know you don't have a lot of water, but in the area, you do have some rafting, kayaking, and you even sent me a nice photo of you paddleboarding. Can you talk about that?
Yes. Well, we have the Grand Canyon. So my husband and I have done 8 or 9 private trips on the Grand Canyon. And we take the paddleboard down once in a while. On the calmer water, I can manage that. Some people are really good and can do the whitewater on paddleboards, but I'm not that good. But yeah, lots to do in the Grand Canyon. I know you had an episode on that between the rafting, kayaking, paddleboarding. I've even seen canoers down there, which is pretty rare though. That's real close. And then we've got a couple of lakes in the area that you can go out to and do more paddleboarding or canoeing. The closest is it's called Lake Mary. It's actually a reservoir for the city of Flagstaff water supply. And that's very common to see people out fishing or paddleboarding, canoeing out there. And then down south of us near Sedona, there's the Verde River, which is a small river, but you can kayak on that. And there's some really, really nice day runs. And then there's some longer runs where you can actually do some overnight trips.
So then if you're flying in, then can you rent the equipment there so you don't have to haul your gear?
Yes, you can. I know you can rent stand-up paddleboards and kayaks and everything. And then there's bike shops for bike rentals. Yeah, I think you can rent everything here.
And speaking of rental, it sounds like we probably need to rent a car as well.
Renting a car would be a good idea. Unless you're just wanting to stay downtown, I would rent a car, definitely. Because most people want to go to the Grand Canyon. There are shuttles and whatnot to go there, but then you're a little limited as to what parts you can see and how long you can stay.
And same for the trailheads too, I'm assuming just for the local hiking.
Yes, a lot of the trailheads you'd want to have a car. Maybe a little bit of high clearance for it, depending on the trail you want to go to.
You've been a resident for a long time, and I want you to share some secrets of places that we visitors would never know about unless you told us where to go.
One place we took our children when they were little, a really cute little place, is called Viet Springs. And it's just a short 2-mile hike in. And you go through a beautiful forest of aspen and pine trees. And then you come to a little water source, a spring. It's just a great place to have a little picnic. So Viet Springs, Viet. And it's just off of our Snowball Road. So it's up in the mountains. It's a wonderful place for spring, summer, or fall.
And this is also a very important Native American area. Can you talk a little bit about that and also what people should do if they come across some artifacts or whatnot?
Sure. Let's talk about the artifacts. First of all, artifacts are great, and it depends on where you are. If you are somewhere out kind of in the wild, in a non-restricted place, a lot of times you can pick up the artifacts, look at them, but then put them right back where you found them. Don't try to organize them or put them all in a place that other people can see. Put it right back where you found it. But in the Flagstaff area, we have several national parks and monuments and different places that are a little more organized and more interesting because they have that organization. And my favorite is Walnut Canyon, which is just east of town by 15 or 20 minutes. And they have a nice day walk there where you can see cliff dwellings and Indian structures, as well as a lot of native plants and just how native life was 800 years ago. And south of town, we have a cliff dwelling set in a large cliff, which is rare to see other than like Mesa Verde National Park, which is several hours north of here.
Are there any good museums that would help be interpreted for us so we know kind of what we're seeing?
Yes. The Museum of Northern Arizona, which is very near where I live, is a great place to go and get a good sense of what is in the area. A lot of Native American history and culture are there as well as natural history. So it makes a really good half-day trip to really understand the area.
Are there any things about Flagstaff in the area that I should have asked you about that I haven't?
If you're thinking you're coming to Flagstaff and it's going to be really, really warm and hot like Phoenix, be a little more prepared. So a lot of people go to Phoenix or something for spring vacation, and then they want to come to Flagstaff for a day trip or Grand Canyon for a day trip, and they dress in shorts and a sweatshirt. Don't do that. Wear a little bit more, especially in the spring. Our weather can be not shorts and sweatshirt weather.
Well, that's kind of important because that's a big mistake people make a lot of times anyway by not being prepared. For me, anytime I go in the mountains, I want to have layers because the weather can change. If all of a sudden a storm rolls through, you're going to get cold and wet. So I like to have extra clothes in my pack.
Yes, exactly. And some people think, oh, they're coming to the Flagstaff, to the Grand Canyon area. And I've heard this before. Well, we're not going to go to Colorado because that's high elevation. Well, we're about 2,000 feet higher than Denver. So if you have any issues with altitude, be aware of that and take it easy a little bit so you don't get in trouble health-wise.
And then Antelope Canyon is a little bit out of the immediate range, but let's talk about that. How far is it and what is it?
Antelope Canyon is about 2.5 hours north of here, up near a town called Page, Arizona. It is an amazing slot canyon. You have to hire a guide to take you in. I think they're Navajo guides, and it's not expensive, but it's just an amazing experience. Just a super narrow, beautiful colors, and you get to spend an hour or two in there. Highly recommend it. And if you're going up there from Flagstaff, on the way, there's a place called Horseshoe Bend where you get an overlook of the Grand Canyon or the upper reaches of the Grand Canyon, which is also just an amazing little day hike. So any of those things just show you the desert Southwest are just amazing.
That's great. Now, I know that's really popular to go to Antelope Canyon. Is that something you need a permit or a reservation to do?
Different people say different things. We went up and we didn't have a reservation. Maybe it wasn't this peak season. And other people said, oh, yes, you absolutely have to have reservations. So I don't know. It depends on the season you're going. Just be aware you should not go if there's any chance of rain because it has been flooded in the past and people have died in there due to the flash flooding that we have in the desert Southwest. But you can call them, and I'm sure you can find this link online and see if you do need reservations.
Yeah, I'll put the reservation link on the website for that. And two, so people understand why there's a risk. There might be a thunderstorm north of you that you're not even hearing, that all of a sudden rain is coming down that canyon. So that's why the risk of flash floods can be so dangerous sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's probably why they have a guide there. And they're probably communicating with the guides that somebody's aware of these things to let people know, I imagine. But you still can be caught flat-footed. If you're in that canyon, you can't climb up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's a number of slot canyons and other narrow spots where you don't want to take any chances. We had a permit last year to hike in Paria Canyon, which is a little further away on the border of Utah and Arizona. And at the last minute, we canceled because it was snowing in Bryce Canyon, which is a longer ways away, but that all feeds into that one slot canyon we were going into.
Better safe than sorry. Well, I sure appreciate you coming on the show, Jenny. We enjoy having you. And whenever you do some of your exciting travels, we want to hear from you. Do you got anything planned coming up?
I'm going back to Portugal in the spring.
Same here.
Okay. Maybe we'll meet up.
And when are you going?
Probably in mid-March.
Same here. And where are you going?
Down to the Rota Vincentina.
Very nice. We did a show on that. I'll put a link to that in the show notes too. I'm going to be doing the Portuguese way from Porto up to Santiago.
Lovely. Lovely. Are you going to be taking the coastal route or the inland route?
That's probably going to depend on the weather and the people that I meet along the way. And I might even do a little bit of both ways because apparently you can. I'm going to be backpacking it with no previous reservation, so I'm going to have a lot of flexibility. This is truly going to be a winging it long distance walk. How long are you planning to hike?
We'll see what kind of time we can take off work, but we're hoping for about 2 weeks.
Wonderful. Be sure to report back and let us know how everything goes. And I appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
After listening to Jenny talk about Flagstaff, I'm definitely going to make sure that I make it to Flagstaff whenever I do my cross country. My hope to be see all the national parks and the whole van or camper kind of a thing that I hope to start in the next few years sometime when I finally officially retire from my rentals. But the whole area sounds so appealing to me because I think of Arizona, I think of like Tucson and Phoenix and all that. And I forget that they have these mountains. And you know me, I'm a mountain girl. I love all that. So super excited to get out there and see it for myself. I hope you've enjoyed today's show and also consider putting Flagstaff on your list. Don't forget, Jenny sent lots of photos, so be sure to go to the website, activetraveladventures.com/Flagstaff, and you'll see the photos. You'll also see links to some of the things that we talked about today, and you can download the free travel planner. Of course, if you're one of my newsletter subscribers, in the once-a-month email, you'll get that automatically next month when that comes out, or you can always just email me at kit@activetraveladventures.com, and we can take care of it that way as well. I'd like to ask you to please share this podcast, the Active Travel Adventures podcast, and also to my companion Adventure Travel Show podcast with your adventure friends. That's the biggest compliment that you can pay me, and it makes me feel good when I get a little dopamine hit when I see that the numbers go up. So that's a great way, if you're enjoying the program, to pay it forward a little bit and make me feel good about what it is I'm doing here. I spend a lot of time doing it. I hope you're getting a lot of value out of it. If you are, I also appreciate an email. Let me know what you like and also what you don't like about the show, because this is a show for you. So with that, stop rambling, and I will sign off for today, and I hope to see you next week on the Adventure Travel Show podcast, and the following week back again with a new episode on the Active Travel Adventures podcast. Until then, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on!